Self-development, self-creation.
So did you miss your course with the tarot cards then?
This is part of it, the tarot cards thing.
Oh, is it?
Yes.
Hi, Liz.
Hiya.
Hi. Let me get Elad in and Garrett in. Angela's here as a disembodied, echoing, distant voice. Hey, Elad. Hey, Garrett.
Hey. Hi.
I'm going to ask Angela to start video by clicking Ask to Start Video. See how that works. So here comes Matt.
I'm here. I've just got to do one thing.
Okay, Liz. Yeah, we're just still in warm-up mode. I should also ask Matt.
I'm not asking you to do anything. I'm just like saying you're all right with that. I'm leaving it on deliberately, so I'm saying, but I'll pop back and blow out in a bit. I need to move. I'm started.
Are you there, Angela?
Oh yeah, hang on. Is some of that?
We can hear you. You know, we can hear you,
Oh.
but we can't see you. Feels like I'm eavesdropping on whatever.
Sorry. Yeah, it was last minute panic stuff going on. I didn't realize my voice was there. I was just trying to move into the other room. Bear with me. I'll join you. I'll
Okay. All right. Yeah. Feel free to mute yourself if you don't want us
I
eavesdrop
shall try. I'll do that now. Thank you.
on what you're doing. Okay. So we're still awaiting Iggy, formerly known as Tony, and we're waiting for Stephen. We're waiting for Claire. There we go. There's Stephen. I manifested him. How wonderful. Okay, so we'll let Stephen join, and then I'll keep half an eye on there. And I think we will. Hey, Stephen, how are you?
Hi, good, James. Hi, everybody. How are you guys?
Okay, so whilst we await the arrival of Claire and of Iggy, we should begin in a mellow and slow way. I've just been doing lots of Tai Chi for the last hour, so I'm a bit more mellow than I might actually like to be. I have to raise my fire now.
I'll be 1 minute. I'll be right back.
Okay. Okay. So whilst people are adjusting themselves, what I'm going to say is, for those who are already here, is there anything that you would particularly like to bring into the space today as a result of anything, but especially any kind of practice that you've been doing around, there's Claire, self-creation stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, Matt.
So
Claire.
I attempted the letter from the future.
Ah, yes. Attempted is an interesting word.
Yeah, I twisted it a little bit. I cheated a little bit. I don't know if it's cheating actually, but instead I decided to date it from this Friday and make the description much shorter.
Yeah.
And the letter turned out to basically be a wish list of goals that I'd achieved by Friday.
Okay.
However, what I found is that what I wanted to achieve that day changed throughout the week. Essentially littered behind me are unfinished projects as I kind of grasp onto the new idea that appears, like, oh, I'll do that instead, or I'll do that. And there was no kind of continuity of purpose throughout the week.
Okay. So what did you learn from this?
One, I'm a magpie for ideas, and just because you have an idea doesn't mean you have to start working on it, I think. And the other one is, I don't know, like, what was the intent of the letter? What was I trying to achieve by writing a letter? I guess I didn't get properly.
Okay. So the act of writing the letter is an act of pure imagination. It is to place yourself in a different place and a different time, and to indulge yourself imaginatively about where you would like to be. Now, what I would suggest when you do that is, now here's the tricky thing. Because say I write a letter from next April saying, like, coming to next April, I will be a demigod, literally smashing planets throughout the entire universe. Not metaphorically, but literally, right? And there's a fair chance that might not manifest. Maybe that's a limiting belief on my part, but I don't think that that's overly likely to come into the world. Now, again, I'm not going to say, because part of the game that we're playing is the game of being open to possibility. So I don't want to, shut down any possibilities, but at the same time, I don't want to be credulous. I don't want to be wasting my time. Let's imagine for a moment that magic were a real thing. It was a real thing. And let's imagine that magic operates in a world of probabilities. Let's imagine that's what it does. It tilts probabilities. Now, like a big influence on me is Wallace Wattles' The Science of Getting Rich. I've read that book probably 15 odd times. Because I made a point at one point going, I'm going to get everything I can get from this book. Because I have a feeling somewhere in my body that this guy went on a deep journey in figuring this stuff out and really lived this. And like Rhonda Byrne, who I think read a bunch of other people's stuff and cherry picked what she thought was the best of the best. But Wallace Wattles, I think, really lives stuff. Now, he talks a lot about, bringing things into the world, bringing things into your life. And he talks about doing things in a certain way. One of the things that he points out is that things will come to you along established means. Now, this is a really interesting thing, because what that means is if I want to start bringing more money into my life, it's unlikely that it will appear from a puff of smoke in front of me. As I think Wallace Wattles puts it, coins will not mint themselves from the air and roll down the street towards you, or something like that. So things are going to come along established lines. Imagine there's all these kind of tracks of possibility that things can come to you along. And they're going to ride the tracks. So if the tracks are not really there, it's going to be tricky to get the stuff coming your way. So you want to make sure the tracks are there. There's one guy, I read a lot of books. There's one guy who has a format for doing magic, which starts off with decide what you want. Step 1, what do you want? Step 2, ensure that it's possible to have it. That's step 2. Step 3 is create a meaningful ritual that means that will come to you. Step 4 is do the ritual. And step 5 is let it go. Forget it. But those early stages are interesting stages. And they're not without problem. They're not unproblematic. Because what we want to do is we want to do what we believe is possible, but we don't want to be limited by our tight, narrow, view of what's possible. So here's the thing. If I put myself at any point in the future and I go into an indulgent space of what, let me go into how I would love my life to be at this particular date in the future, what things I would love to be there. I want to make sure, I don't want to get into a debate about what is or isn't so in a left brain way, but I do, let me just let Iggy in, but I do want to, I do want to ensure that it is plausible to me, that it rings true. This is a thing that is going to come up over and over again. Whatever place we put ourselves in, whatever it is that we create, and this came up, I think, from Angela and some feedback in the group about writing sort of self-creative statements and then having the feeling of, yeah, but that's not true. So we want to watch out for this, because that will cut against us 100% of the time. Now, I'm not saying any of this necessarily applies to what you were doing there, Tony, but the point is to put yourself in a place of experiencing having created what you would love to have created, and to be able to hang out in that, bathe in that, enjoy being in that space for a time, let it permeate your entire being. But as soon as you find it, if you find it triggering that, yeah, I don't think that's okay. So either that, yeah, I don't think that is a voice of wisdom, or it's a voice of limitation. It's not always easy to know which it is. I would love to give you a simple formula for knowing the difference between the voice of wisdom and the voice of limitation, or the voice of wisdom and the voice of paranoia. I would love to give the simple formula. I wish I could say they speak in different accents and here's what you want to listen for. But the distinction is, that's a whole other area. It's worth getting into. I just don't know if it's worth getting into now, is how do you listen to your inner signals in useful ways? I know it's a thing that can be challenging for a lot of people. So yeah, the point of it is to immerse yourself in an act of inner creation and to see what that does. Now, you picked a short-term version. So when you say it was a wish list, you see, now that's interesting language, and we're going to start talking about language today. That's interesting language. It was I think you said it was a wish list of things you wanted to achieve.
Yeah.
At what point did you label it a wish list?
On reflection.
Okay.
And so as I was kind of going through the process, I was like, yeah, I'd love to do that and that. And it kind of felt like a child writing a letter to Santa Claus.
Right. So this is specifically not, I'm going to give you a not, I'm going to break the rules. It is not supposed to carry the energy of I want this.
Okay.
It is supposed to not carry the energy of I want this. It's supposed to carry the energy of I have this, and I am as fucking grateful as all hell, you know, as I'm just, this is awesome. It wants the energy of ownership, not the energy of this is great, this is my life, not the energy of it would be great to have this. Right? So this is the thing. I stayed away from this kind of stuff for a long time because there's a old bunch of research from mainstream psychology that says that associating into your goals actually makes them less likely to happen. And I always thought, isn't that odd that that's exactly the opposite of what all these new thought people say and so many other people say, but I'm going to stick with the mainstream science on it. So I did for a long time. And then I thought, I wonder what would happen if I stop sticking with the mainstream science and start doing the woo-woo. Oh, look, cool stuff starts happening. There's a funny thing. But that's just my experience. We'll see what your experience is. So what we want to do is we're looking to sort of bring appropriate energies to something. This is why much of the time when I think about what it is that I want to create, if I'm going into a kind of a magical headspace of creating it, I bring it in rather than think about trying to get to it. It's like bring it in. Remember this, right? The Matthew principle, to those who have, yet more shall be given. If you are in a place of wishing, then you get more wishing. If you're in a place of wanting, you get more wanting. So if it's like, yeah, I'd love to have this, well, then you're going to get more, I'd love to have this. But you're not going to get a lot of, I love having this. Right, so a couple of points there. What I want to do is, here's a recommendation from my friend Lionel Snell. Lionel says, if you're going to start doing magic, right? If you were to do something utterly crazy, if you're going to be the fool and start doing magic, don't try and, you know, terraform a planet with the power of your mind right off the bat. Right? Start small. Start with things where you might get sort of easier wins. So set a low bar, I guess, is what Lionel would say. No, he wouldn't. That's my language, not his. But I'm using a metaphor on his behalf. Because the good thing about a low bar is you go, oh, look, that's cool. I got some wins there. And you pay attention to feedback and you feed that feedback in, and then it elevates what you're going to go for. Because a lot of this is the energy that you bring. If you bring an energy of like doubt, it's going to undermine it significantly. So wishing, as my old mentor Steve Charney used to say, hope is not a strategy. But not only is it not a strategy, it's not an especially good energy either. So can I ask, are you happy to share some of the content on what you wanted to have bubble up through?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, it was what a fantastic week. So just reflecting back on it.
Yeah.
Firing on all cylinders, raving to go. You found flow and logged 30 hours work.
Hang on. You found flow.
Yeah.
Troubleshooting. Troubleshooting. Let's get troubleshooting.
Yeah.
So you want to be, this is like what's in your world.
Yeah.
So forget that that's you in the past. And imagine you're writing it to, so it would be I have found, you know, what I found flow.
Yeah.
So, because you is a dissociating term. So you want to be in a place of ownership. We're going to talk about this more probably today, is ownership. So you want to go, I found flow. By the way, if I was doing this myself, if I'd written, I found flow, I don't want to know what kind of flow. I want to know if it was phenomenal flow or beautiful flow or powerful flow or creative flow or generative flow.
Why?
Because I want to make it more alive for me. By the way, just to everyone else here, I really liked that why question. You know, people say in the world of coaching stuff, never ask the why question. That one I really liked. Right? Because I don't do anything. It's anyone who's learned hypnosis from me knows how anally retentive I am with hypnosis and hypnotic language. There is nothing in my languaging that isn't there for a reason. Right? So like, I want to have myself come alive. So if I want to say, so a kind of declarative statement that I might do is I might write, I am enjoying flow. Right? Just to take a statement like that. I am enjoying flow. Enjoying is one of my favorite creation words. I am enjoying flow. And then I might go, what if I was enjoying phenomenal flow, phenomenal quantities of profoundly powerful generative flow? Now, that might be over the top, but what I want to do is I want to juice, I want to evoke, I want to get as much semantic crackle as possible. And the other thing that I'm going to do when I'm doing this is I will, here's a recommendation that goes with the magician. By the way, we are moving into magician phase now, the magician archetype. Start feeling language. So the magician's magic word is abracadabra, which I think is Aramaic or something like that, or Aramaic. So yeah, that's nodding, right? Yeah. And, you know, one etymology of it is I create as I speak, right? I've got a guy doing some editing for me at the moment. He's changed a lot of the grammar He said, sorry to be a grammar Nazi, but I changed this grammar because this is wrong. It's like, no, that's hypnotic language. Don't change my grammar. It's there for a reason. Because he thinks about language in a particular way. There's a grammatically correct form and an incorrect form, and it's about the rules and it's about definitions and doing the right thing, you know. But like when I'm teaching hypnosis, I teach people to use language to evoke stuff within people. So when we're using any kind of language in self-creation stuff, we want to be starting to feel it. If you're not used to feeling language, you will be, because I'm going to encourage you to feel language. Even when I say to somebody, even when I'm saying to you, like it's about what we evoke, right? You know how I say evoke? I don't say it's about what we evoke. Oh, it's about what we evoke, you see? Right? Right, because I want to get stuff coming alive in my system. As a hypnotist, when I speak a word, I want it to resonate in my being, and I want that resonance to remain connected with the word as I deliver it to the person I'm speaking to. Right? So that's a kind of magical act, Stephen, yeah.
So in doing this, basically, you want to Shatner it right to that edge where you can still feel it without the disbelief stuff kicking in.
Right. So maybe is the answer to that. And just for people that don't know, I have this thing I teach when I'm teaching people to do hypnosis. I have a concept called Shatnering, which is named after the great William Shatner. And it is simply an exercise for developing vocal variety and developing dynamism in your voice. Because if you look at, go watch the William Shatner show reel, and it's overacting 101. It's like, by God, bones. Everything is just really over the top. So I often teach people to Shatner because I did it myself. When I used to do public speaking, I used to get feedback all the time saying I lacked vocal variety. I didn't know how to use my voice to impact others. So I started to bring in, I was tonally flat. I started to bring in more dynamism by basically in private, I would caricature stuff. I'd like make like I was William Shatner and just go really over the top with it. Now, when I teach that concept, Shatnering in hypnosis, I'm really just talking about developing range, different dynamics within the voice, because it's overacting, so it loses connection with the feeling and being often. So what I'm advocating doing here, because what we're interested in here is how we affect or influence ourselves. I may write words like, I am profoundly grateful for the flow that is coming through more and more progressively in my life. I might write something like that. I won't necessarily speak it out loud, but I will resonate each word in my body. I will say it within myself, and I will, I will feel it with real resonance and reverence and all of these things. So I want to treat this like if this was a magic spell, what is it that makes it magic? If this collection of words were magic, what makes them magic? It is not the mere empty words. It is what those words bring to life within you, or what you use those words for in terms of bringing to life, internally, in terms of, I just tend to call it energy. And I mean that like metaphorically, but maybe it's not, I don't know. But yeah, Elad.
When you write it down, do you put like an underline or bold does it show in your writing as well, or just in your mind?
No, different people will do this in different ways. So I use the writing just as a sort of like an anchor to the page. I don't mean an anchor in an NLP sense. I just mean something that's going to stop me from just floating off completely, something to return to. And it's also useful to sort of go back and visit things. I don't have my book to hand. It's over in my chair by the window I like to sit in. So when I'm writing it, like I might write it down. It's almost like I'm writing down something that seems like a good thing, like the right thing, and then I'll resonate it for a bit. I'll go in and go, what is that? And I will let my felt sense suggest upgrades. Here's a thing I want to talk about actually right now, because we're going to get into this. This is good that you do stuff and you ask me questions, because I don't know any more consciously a lot of what I know, because I've spent years learning this stuff. So it's good that people dig stuff out. A lot of the time, when people start talking about using language to create, I create as I speak, abracadabra, they can think in terms of this idea that there's a right way and a wrong way. There's good ways to language things and bad ways to language things. You know, like people know you should never use shoulds and that sort of thing. So there's a right way and a wrong way, they think. But actually, that's not really true. There's just better ways and worse ways. And there's general patterns that tend to, you know, there's a sort of global set of rules that tend to be true for most people, but you get individual idiosyncrasies as well. So for example, if you were to set a goal for yourself, you might write the words, you know, I want to have achieved this by the end of this week, right? Or, you know, I want to be more confident, let's say somebody says, all right? I want to be more confident. Let's pick something a bit general. Now, let me ask you this, Matt. Is there a quality that you would like to have more of in your life?
Quality?
Yeah. Quality of being.
Yeah, like industriousness, if that's a thing, like to be able to sit at the desk and do the 8 hours of work, you know.
Okay. Why do you want that?
I work in a digital marketing agency. Everything's done by hours. I have to log hours. So to be able to sit at the desk like everybody else and log the hours of quality work.
Okay.
Kind of really helps. Previously, I was client side, where you don't have the need for everything's timed to a T in terms of tasks. So you could get in the morning, have a cup of tea, chat to your mates. And no one was really asking how long does it take to do X, Y, and Z.
Okay. When you were saying that, what was it that was coming up in your body? If those words had an energy, what kind of energy would they have?
Like bricks.
Bricks.
Yeah.
Okay, so like bricks. So when you think about industriousness and bricks, how do you feel in yourself?
Well, it's like those dark satanic mills, isn't it? That type of.
Right. So here's the thing. Because I was going to put this out to the group. As Matt's talking about this, what vibe do you get? Is it like...
Just...
Yeah.
I'm trying hard to get myself out of that spot.
Right. Now look, I don't want to be saying anything about what people want, but like, if what you want does not have you come alive, what you're trying to do, I'm going to suggest here, and you make of this what you will, you're trying to make a slave of yourself. It's like, yeah, I need to be able to kind of just get my head down and just work even when I hate it. Yeah, I need to do that just only for the rest of my life, though. Yeah. I don't know. Look, I don't want to be judgmental about that. It's just that here's the thing about, right, this whole thing, there is like inherent biases within this. So this whole thing is about, excuse my language, but it's about coming the fuck alive. And you know, like, now if that had you come alive, you went, yeah, I want to like be more industrious, bricks, dark satanic mills, fuck yeah. you know, then that probably would have potential, right? If that pulls you towards it.
It does for practical reasons, like in the middle of a pandemic, having that security and practicality is.
Yeah, I understand that. I understand that practical reasons, right? It's that, but practical reasons. This is not. You're talking about what you should do right now. If you're into
driving the should, where does that drive come from? Of should do's.
It comes from what Freud would call the superego. These are not your values, Matt. There's the clue. If they were your values, they'd have you come alive. They're someone else's. I don't know. Yeah. Your dad's, society's, I don't know, someone's, but they're not yours. Because if they were your values, you'd be like, oh man. Yeah. You see, this is the whole thing. And like, if you go back and read the initial copy for this group, this is the point. We are raised, we're told, oh yeah, this is what you should do. This is what you've got to do. Right? It's a con game. I can guarantee you pick anyone who's a wild and crazy creator in the world. Who would be an example of a creator for you?
Of a creator?
Yeah.
Luc Gemay springs to mind.
All right, Luc Gemay. I'll bet you any money that Luke does not go, right, I've got to get industrious. I know he had a book called Building Blocks, not quite bricks. But creators don't work that way, in a linear way. They find life, they find meaning, they find connections. Now, I know sometimes it looks like there's some chopping wood, carrying water to get done, some stuff that needs to get done. I spent a large part of today going through from my editor, my book editor, 37 questions. It's taking me all day to get to 22, I think. You know, now, it's probably not how I would have chosen to spend my day. But I sat down and I did it and I got into flow doing it. But I don't want to live my life like that. I had content to create for the online deep apprenticeship a few days ago. There's some get through work to be done there. There's a creative bit and there's a get through bit. So I'm kind of like looking at how I can put that together. So as I can be in, here's the thing. This is about creating magically. You will create magically from your passion time, from your genius time, from your talent time, not from your gray zone time. So what you're saying there, it sounded to me like you're saying, I want to get better at doing gray zone stuff.
Yeah.
Right? And like the only reason a person will want to get better at doing gray zone stuff is if they think that the only way to create what they want is to do gray zone stuff. Here's the thing, and gray zone stuff, by the way, like occasionally I do plenty of gray zone stuff, I'll admit it, but it's always within the context of a bigger vision, right? It's within the context of like, I'm doing it now because I want this fucking book, right? Is there anyone here who's deeply offended by the use of profanities? Please do say, because
Right. Good.
Okay. I want this book, right? I want it. It's been a long time coming, and I've decided it's coming, right? Something shifted inside, probably because I did some, what I would call magic stuff to go, yeah, I want this in the world. This is coming in. So it's changed my state of being. It doesn't mean that there might not be some tasks that sit within that I end up doing. But at the moment, if you want to be more industrious, I'd say more industrious for what purpose?
For now, just for stability.
Right. For stability.
Yeah, I'm kind of in this, I'll put things on pause while this pandemic's running, and then when it's done, go back out and do what I was going to do.
So let me ask you about stability. When you think about stability, what kind of energy does that have for you, stability?
Oh, it's boring. Yeah, it's completely boring.
Right. So what I'm going to suggest here, this is my read on this, and you're a human being, Matt, so this is not a judgment on you. It's a very, very human thing. What I'm going to suggest here is that's fear-driven. It's not a fear, like, it's not like a, really you want stability. Why? What's the opposite of stability?
Instability.
Instability. So you don't want instability, right? Because that could be bad, because then you might not know what would happen. Maybe you would lose something. Maybe you would lose your job. Maybe you would lose your home. Maybe, right? By the way, really, this is not a judgment. One of my deepest, most profound fears, I used to have this anxiety that would sit there every evening when I was trying to unwind. It wasn't too much of a problem because I just go, ah, there's a sensation. But I'd be like, what is that? What is this anxiety that I'm feeling? There's nothing apparently on my mind. One day I was meditating on it and it came through. The answer. What if I lose everything? That was my big fear. What if I lose everything? Now, I'm going to say this about fear. I'm going to suggest that fear creates nothing. It doesn't put us, now people say necessity is the mother of invention and all of this, not when you're afraid, because the blood drains out the creative parts of your brain and you get stuck. A number of years ago, I had created with my family us traveling around the world for a year. It was crazy, it was impossible, it was foolish. I jacked in many elements of my business that have been working extremely well in order to just up sticks and go traveling around the world for a year. Now, about halfway through, due to a series of unforeseen events, we ended up with considerably less money. As someone rear-ended the hire car we were in and something else happened, and I never paid for the insurance on the hire car, so I lost a large excess on that. And we were in Hawaii, and we paid for accommodation in Venice, in Los Angeles. We'd already paid for the accommodation for 2 months, and that was a substantial amount of money. Getting accommodation for 2 months in Venice is not cheap. Now, I went into a panic, went into a complete panic saying we're screwed. I put out my emergency backup product that I had, put it out, nobody bought it. The tumbleweed rolled by. This had not happened before. I was like, oh shit. And I went into a blind panic, virtually, going, that's it, we're screwed, we're gonna have to go home, we're gonna lose all this money. And I was really tense, really fearful. And fortunately, that only lasted probably a bit less than 24 hours before I could step back into, because I was caught in a trance, I was caught in a fear trance, a money fear trance. That is not a place to do magic from. It will create, I can guarantee it. It does do magic, it does its own magic, but it's not the right kind. So I had to stop, step back, and clear myself through. And I said to Lexi, I said, how much do we need? She said, £10,000. I said, when do we need it by? She said, about a week's time. Okay. I said, in that case, I shall create £10,000 in the next 7 days. And I did. Now, I'm aware that what I created with was my life and my circumstances. I had never created £10,000 in a week before with no planning or anything like that. But I did it. But I could only do it by staying in a place of creation and not a place of fear. Fear kills creation. So this is the big challenge. This is the big challenge of this stuff. This is why people, when they do the law of attraction stuff, mostly they fail, because the things they put up on their vision board or whatever, or the things that they're trying to get, they're actually trying to get from a place of fear, not from a place of desire or love or enthusiasm or fire or energy or vision or any of these things. It's fear, it's underlying fear. And it's a bastard, because it wants to sneak in every single gap. That's speaking for myself. I don't want to put that on anyone else, but, you know, it wants to sneak in everywhere. It wants to, you know, like when it comes to creating, it almost never helps. So this is one of the reasons why in starting to create, like, you know, I've talked about this before, how do you hold an outcome? Not too tight, not too loose. We hold too tight when we're fearful about not getting it, or we're too desperate to get it. You know, so there's a trick of like holding more loosely, a trick of allowing things to come in. In order to profit, you must invest in loss. And one of the most powerful things, and really if we were doing tarot, this turns up in line 2 of the tarot with the Hanged Man and death. There's an old Buddhist saying which says you can only have true freedom when you recognize the precious vase is already broken. You know, and that's the thing. It's like, I'm already fucked. So now I can create.
I know that feeling.
Liz knows that feeling, right? Which didn't I say to you, Liz, as horrible as it might seem, the universe may have just done you a massive favor this year. because you know, everything's fallen apart anyway.
Everything's fucked. My job is gone. I lost my room. I had to give up my apartment. I had to sell my car and everything and give up living in California. I don't think, yeah, everything except me, right?
Yeah.
I had a moment when I first arrived in March where I remember I opened my eyes one morning and I said, well, I'm still here. Me, the I am, right? The me is still here. And everything was just stuff, right? Trances, stuff. The California trance, the work trance, the audio engineer trance, everything, none of it mattered because I was just like, I'm still me. Nothing's changed. Everything's changed, but nothing's changed.
Right.
But yeah, terrifying. And zero, you know, I mean, it's, I'd like to say that I just pivoted. I didn't fucking pivot. I was scared. I've been scared, and I'm just now coming out of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the thing is, if you were on the other side of it, looking at it coming, then you're terrified, right? Because on some level, you're buying into the idea that this will destroy me. But the wave comes, and it washes a lot away. But there you are.
Yeah.
Still you, still God.
Still me. Still there, yeah. Things look different, you know. It's raining instead of sunny, and people sound different. I don't get up at 4 a.m. anymore. I don't have any money. You know, that's an interesting one.
Right.
So things are different, but I mean, it's so ridiculous. Things are so different, but nothing's changed. It's very strange. I'm still me. So everything, I mean, you talk about a lot about trances, but it really feels like every element of what I thought was me was completely fabricated. And I only realized that when it was all taken away and I was still here.
Right.
If that makes sense.
It makes real sense to me.
Yeah.
You know, and this is the thing. That's death. That's the death. That's the you know, card 13. Scythed down the lot. You know.
Yeah.
But then that gets plowed back in. And there's an opportunity for new life.
Oh yeah.
Now, look, what I want to do here with this, I have a affinity for martial arts. If I was a boxing coach, I'd want to train you all up, and we were doing a boxing thing. I'd want to get your boxing tie. I'm echoing back from somebody. I'm not sure who. I think it was Liz. I've muted you because I'm echoing back from your mic. So, yeah. So, if I was a boxing coach, I want to get you tight at boxing. So what I want to do with everyone here is I want to get your magician self really on it, really with a lot of high level of skill and craft. This is all about your magician self. It's not about you as a human being. So what I mean by that is, if I were teaching you boxing and you were picking up boxing at the rate that you were picking up boxing, and everyone's going to have their strengths and everyone's going to have their weaknesses, none of that says anything about who you are, only about your boxing, right? So this is what I want to say. So if people are in a place where they get caught up in various undermining trances, those trances are not who you are either, right? This is going to happen. There's not a thing that's going to happen where suddenly you become the master of every situation and all of these sorts of things. So there may be certain traps and certain pitfalls that as yet you're not seeing. If I'm suggesting and pointing things out or teaching anything or anything like that, that runs really contrary to how you may habitually do things, it's not a comment or a judgment on how you habitually do things. My assumption is that everyone here is a magician, but on another level is an incurable freak like me, right? So I'm assuming we're all that, and we're all human beings as well. So there are certain things that I'm going to advocate for here. And one of the things is starting to recognize, like when we're going to create, as my friend William Whitecloud says, everyone has a heart. And what he means when he says everyone has a heart is they have stuff that they love, stuff that they value, stuff that has them come alive. Now, we don't see people's heart most of the time. What we see in people, in most of the time in people's behaviors, is their conditioning, not their heart. So we might communicate to somebody else, and most of what they're saying or doing is stuff they think they have to say or do in order to get something to happen so that something terrible won't happen. And, you know, and you don't see their heart. They're not connected to their heart. And it happens in ourselves. We get so pulled into the, what am I supposed to do? What do I need to do to get security? And we can get caught in all manner of traps. So here's a trap I was in for years. I was trying to build a business, and my only motivation for building a business was so I could get out of business, i.e. retire. Hang on a second. How's the energy of that one going to work? What I want is to not be in business. So I'm going to build a business so I can not be in business, right? Which means that's never going to come from a place of heart. All the time, that's my intention. It's never going to come from a high vibration state, a place of vision, a place of like, oh, yeah, right? Because I've fallen for someone else's stuff, someone else's beliefs about how I need to get what I want. Well, here's another thing. Another way of putting it is I wanted to build a business so I could have freedom. But if freedom's a higher value for me, well, I can have freedom right now by skiving off work and going walking, right? Or doing whatever. I'll just spend the day doing Tai Chi instead of making money because I can have freedom now. And then and I wonder why I'm not getting my work done. because my work wasn't connected to a vision, right? Now, here's the thing. Matt, you work for someone else at the moment.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't, and I haven't done since 2008, as I like to mention over and over again, because it's a victory. Every hour that passes is a victory. But here's the thing. That means I have a lot of flexibility to choose how I deploy my time, because I get to deploy all of my time creating what I want to create in my life. And I own that 100%. That's my choice for living in the world. Now, if I did have a job, because at the moment it was necessary to pay the bills, if that job was something I loved and I was connected with a real vision for it and I had a lot of creative freedom, then I might do the job for one reason. If I was in another position and I had the job and it's like, yeah, I'm doing this job at the moment because that's what needs to happen at the moment, then I would put that in the category of chop wood, carry water, not in the category of magic. So if you want to, doing things magically doesn't mean never. I'm going to borrow the Zen Buddhist phrase: before magic, chop wood, carry water. After magic, chop wood, carry water. So the aim here is not to get better at chopping wood, carrying water. You may have some wood chopping and water carrying to do. You know, and the aim is definitely not to turn yourself into more of a machine. I would advocate turning yourself into more of a human being. So I don't know how this is going to relate to your work stuff. Do you like your work?
I love the work. Yeah, I love it.
So which bit don't you love?
I love the strategy bit. I hate then having to actually do the action off the back of the strategy.
All right, so you love the strategy bit.
Yeah.
But you don't want to do the action.
No, and I have to, because I'm the only resource in the business, I have to do the whole thing, both the strategy and the day-to-day work on the account.
So what do you have a vision for creating yourself beyond the stuff you don't love?
No.
There's a rich seam to mine there. Because at the moment you've been thinking, how can I get myself to be better at doing the stuff that I don't love? Right? What I would suggest is a stronger place to come from is, how do I create myself beyond the stuff that I don't love? When will I do that? Here's the thing. Why not get selfish? Why not aim for a life where you're only doing stuff you love? Just a thought. I'll share with you. I mean, it's going to be different content-wise, but that's my mission. And I get closer and closer and closer all the time. I do not want to burn up my precious life doing shit that I hate, right? I don't want to do that. Even if I've got a belief system that says, yeah, but you know, do you know what my mum said to me when I was 19 years old? And I was whining and complaining about life with my mantra of my 19-year-old self, which was, I didn't sign up for this. And by this, I meant life. And I was complaining about this job that I had. And she said to me in exasperation, she said, well, that's what life's about, doing things you don't want to do. Right? So I remember thinking at the time, God, that sounds shit. Really? That's what life's about? Doing things you don't want to do? Damn. But that, of course, is what life's about, according to my mother at the time, especially when she was still working. She's retired now, and now life's about surfing the net on an iPad. But back then it was about doing things you don't want to do. But and the world will probably try and tell you, oh yeah, here's what you have to do. I would at least invite you to be open to the possibility that if you're going to create a truly magical life for yourself, and it doesn't have to be right now. But to me, it's like, you know, I say this all the time. Whenever I say this to Lexi, when she's saying, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm like, okay, so how are we going to create ourselves beyond that? What is everything I want to create myself beyond in my life? Instead of just sucking it up, I'm going to have to do that. Like, you know, I'm slow about this one, but I want to create myself beyond video editing. I'm really so done with video editing. You know, so I want to create myself beyond that. And I recognize that I'm still video editing. Why? Why am I still video editing rather than outsourcing to somebody else?
Money.
No, it's not money. It's fear. That's why. The only reason I'm not outsourcing to someone else is fear. Even if it was money, money would be a cover for fear. I'm afraid that I will spend the money on having somebody else do it and it won't yield results. It won't create anything back. I won't get a return on investment, linear thinking. It would still be fear, right? Which has been a part of the mix for me not outsourcing the video editing. I can't afford it.
But it's about, we need to talk about balance of probability. That is a probable outcome that it won't yield a return on investment.
Is it?
Yeah. You see campaigns die all the time because of poor whatever.
So here's the thing. In the context of what I do, I've had a YouTube channel for 10 years. All of the income that I have is largely due to output through social media. Social media, without a social media presence, I'd have no income. So clearly, what I create into the world through social media creates. So why don't I create more of it? Why don't I create more out there in the world? Because I'm at capacity. Is it a gamble? Well, it depends on how I look at it, you see. And it depends on the criteria by which I create it. There's a chair by the window then. I bought it with another unit. I think it cost the chair and the little cabinet that sits by it. I saw them in John Lewis. And I think they were 1,500 quid together. And I bought them about a year ago. At no point when I was spending 1,500 quid on a chair, did I think to myself, oh, but, you know, is it going to be a good investment? Am I going to get my money? Am I going to get a good return on investment? No, I didn't. I just wanted the chair because I thought it was nice. So here's the thing. Why wouldn't I spend 1,500 quid on hiring someone to edit my videos for? I don't know how long they'd be doing my editing videos for, a couple of months or something. Is it really about, oh, I might not make my money back? Or is I might not make my money back just a trance? Because it's a way I'm thinking about things. It's been caught in a reality tunnel. This is only worth doing if I make my money back in a linear coffee machine way. See, it's not coming from a place of love. It's coming from a place of fear. Whereas if I was like, oh man, I would love. Here's an example, right? This is to do with inside out reality creation. Let me tell you about my friend, Alberto Delisla, who is a magician. I don't know whether he thinks of himself as this or not. But Alberto, he lives in Belo Horizonte in Brazil. And I first met Alberto, I don't know, 4 years ago or something. He came over to the UK and he said, hey, James Tripp, I know you. You don't know me. He said, anyway, he wrote to me a few years ago, about 5 years ago. He said, can he put my videos out, subtitle them in Portuguese and put them out on his channel? I was like, yeah, whatever, go for it. And I didn't realize I'd actually ended up getting massive in Brazil as a result. but so did Alberto. Alberto, inspired by my YouTube channel, started a YouTube channel of his own. Except he has 10 times more subscribers than I do, more than 10 times more. Because Alberto really let rip. He really created that channel. I asked him, I said, I was curious when we finally kind of met and spoke properly. I said, how come your channel's so big? He said, well, and he said that he will make a video. He will go anywhere in the world to make a cool video. I'm like, but you might spend thousands on airfares just to go somewhere and make a video for YouTube, and you don't know you're going to get the money back. He said, yeah, but I want a really cool channel. What's going on here? Alberto's willing to spend money to create something. He's not going, it's only worth spending if we get the money back. So it's an interesting thing. Then Alberto says to me, he says, you have loads of fans in Brazil. Why don't you come to a hypnosis training? I'll put you on in Brazil. So I thought, okay. And I gave him the same deal I give with everybody, or I used to give with anyone when I would go out and train somewhere. I say, okay, we'll just split the profits after expenses, 50-50. He's like, okay. So he put this training on, and it was the largest, he said it was the largest hypnosis training ever in Latin America. So there's over 200 people attended, and they paid a good ticket price. Now, I've figured out that we should have made about £100,000 each, which is probably like, what's that, $130,000 each in profit after basic expenses for this event. Do you know how much profit we made? Nothing. Because Alberto spent it all on having a Brazilian soap star actress come and compare for the weekend, and having Paulo Ricardo, the top-selling recording artist in Brazil of all time, come and play one of the evenings, have a live band, another live band playing during breaks, have really high-quality food. He didn't advertise this. This was a bonus for the people. He didn't use it to get people to pay. It was a bonus. And I could not fathom it. I'm like, what have you done? What have you done? And he says, he said, it's like a boss. I'm like a boss. And he used to have this like a boss hashtag, right? Like a boss. And I was just like, oh my God. I said, Alberto, you are going to pay me some money for this. I want at least this amount of money. And he paid me out of his own pocket because I was a bit cross that he'd spent a lot of money on unnecessary, what to me were unnecessary trappings. Because why? I was thinking in terms of, we're doing this to make money. Do you know what Alberto said? He said, well, it's my birthday. He said, I always wanted to have Paulo Ricardo play at my birthday. So that's what he did. He had Paulo Ricardo come play at his birthday at my expense, at our expense, but I just didn't get it at the time. This was a few years ago. Now, it suddenly hit me. Alberto's hashtag, like a boss, that was not some funny throwaway hashtag line. That was a pure magical act. You see, Alberto's not really bothered about making money. Or he is, he likes to make money, but making money is a part of something bigger. And the something bigger is like a boss. That means Alberto has a lot of people work for him and create for him. Why? Because it's part of his vision to have people work for him and create for him. It's not part of his vision to make as much money as possible while paying out as little as possible, right? So even having people work for him is part of his vision in life. Having Paulo Ricardo play is part of his vision in life. Most of what he does is part of his vision in life. His vision in life includes being a boss, partly like a boss, not like an office boss, more like a sort of like, I don't know, mafia boss or something. But, you know, that's his vision, so he makes it real. He has lots of people work for him. He doesn't do anything he doesn't want to do himself. Why? Because that's his vision that he creates. He didn't go, I have to do things and be really stingy and make a load of money so I can like then that's not his vision, right? Now, the difference between myself and Alberto for a long time was Alberto had this vision of being a boss. I had this vision of being a hermit in the woods. And it's just like, if I could be successful enough in business that I could buy my way to being a hermit in the woods, right? But you see how, in terms of a vision, they create very, very different things. And the example here, by the way, is not to say that Alberto's vision is correct and mine is incorrect. It's just that, ironically, his vision is much, much more effective for creating income than mine. Even though income is less of an important part of it, it's part of a bigger vision, whereas everything that I was doing was like a linear thing to like get income so that I could therefore pay for my freedom. I could buy my way out of the life that my mum had promised me of doing things I didn't want to do. Right? So, you know, that for me, seeing into Alberto's reality and how he created from the inside out, he's a phenomenal teacher to me. I said this a few years ago, I model people. And a lot of what I know about magic doesn't come from reading books on chaos magic or anything like that, even though I have read many books on that. It comes from modeling people who are profoundly generative and looking at what they do from the inside out to create the lives that they want. It doesn't mean I'm going to share the same values, but it's just this thing. Instead of seeing things as a line, I need to do these things to get here, what I call the get through to get to, right? You want to get through a load of stuff, mundane stuff, because you want to get to stability. Which is, by the way, a perfectly understandable thing. But it is a way of organizing reality. And what I would invite you to be open to is there are other ways of organizing reality. And you know, when you come to having a vision, you know, the thing, like on the Magician's Journey page, it's like this sort of round thing with a sort of network diagram with the balls coming off, right? I originally used that for Power of 8, but the meaning of it retrospectively became clearer. See the life that you want to create as a molecule, not as a line of events to get somewhere. What are the things I want to bring together rather than what do I need to do to get there? You know, and start really bringing them together. Now, that doesn't mean that you're not going to do linear stuff. It doesn't mean that you're not going to do chop wood, carry water, but you will do it in the context of magic. So if you say before magic, chop wood, carry water, after magic, chop wood, carry water, but it's not the same chop wood, carry water. It is infused with magic and it takes place inside of a context of vision and inspiration and just cool things. So, you know, we're going to keep threading round this. Is that a hand from Liz?
It wasn't, and then it was. So, can I just chip in something?
Yeah.
I just had this vision of the witch's cauldron.
Right.
Of making the thing.
Yeah.
Whatever the thing is. I was just listening to you talking about bringing things together and making that creation that then becomes the thing.
Right.
Versus like doing it in a linear way. I just had it just popped in.
I think it's probably a valid metaphor. I often talk about, like when I'm doing client work, I think about a container. Like a lot of people think in terms of linear processes when it comes to doing change work. Oh, I'm going to do this and this and this. If you look at more like the Stephen Gilligan approach, Stephen Gilligan has this idea of generative trance. It's almost like generative trance is, like in your metaphor, is the cauldron. And then it's what are you going to bring into the cauldron and how are those things going to interact within that kind of picture. So this sort of bringing things in. I do a lot of this, like this metaphor. For example, I was doing some self-processing work the other day, and I went into a particular state, and there was a particular thing I was working with, and I chose to bring in some arbitrary things. I literally looked out my window, and I made some meanings about some things I saw in the world, and allowed them to become a part of the trance container, the cauldron that I was running on myself at that moment, just to see what they did, and ascribing them as generative. So allowing them to be generative because I chose them to be, which is something that we will get into. But yeah, that was a useful exploration. So thank you, Matt, for opening that up. Just as out of curiosity, Matt, what are you thinking about all that? What are your thoughts about all that?
It's mind blowing.
Good. Or I hope.
Yeah. I've got a lot of fun things to play with after this.
Yeah. I intend to be like, my intention is to blow apart everyone's paradigms about most stuff. All right. And I'm not saying I'm right, but I am here to say, have you looked at it like this?
It sounds so logical, and you can read it in a book, but until you can kind of turn in and see yourself from the outside in to be able to pick that apart, I don't know, it's almost like part of me is blind to it.
Yeah, you will be, Matt. You cannot not be. It's really, really fucking hard to see what we're seeing the world through. So we'll see the world through various consciousness structures. And when we're looking at it through that consciousness structure, we'll go, well, I'm damn sure that's the way it is. Oh, it must be that way. You know, a lot of the time, if I'm doing coaching work with people, I have a really simple job. And it is about bringing a different seeing to things. And then facilitating a different seeing in the person that I'm working with. So they can go, oh, shit. Right? I hadn't seen it like that. There's something I hadn't seen. And often these consciousness structures that we get caught up in, right? Here's a consciousness structure I'm caught up in. It's keeping me in this trance. When I see it, oh, look at that. You know, it can be a case of the elusive obvious. It's like, oh my God, you know, like this thing had me. You know, so we are all, we cannot see the world as it is, only as we're seeing it, only as we're making it up. So we want to be getting outside of our own consciousness structures and starting to see the underlying presuppositions, the underlying assumptions, the things that we just never questioned.
So if, just on that point though, so if I'm evaluating these things, I need something to evaluate them against in terms of my personal truth. Would that be a value set that I...
Well, yes. So yeah, this is a good thing, right? Because you're setting me up, which is good, right? Because this is, I always call self-transformation stuff bootstrapping, because there's that old metaphor of pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, which, as Alan Watts says, is impossible, except it's not in the metaphorical realm. So, you know, if we're going to evaluate our own consciousness structures, our own trance structures, our own behaviors, our own trance repertoires, if we're going to evaluate that stuff, what is the set of values we're going to bring to bear? Right? And this is where I've talked about this at different times, different places, and in different ways. On the Self-Hypnosis and Personal Alchemy, I talked about the transcendent self. But here I'm starting to talk about the magician's self. Now, starting to look at values. Values is an interesting area. Values are not fixed for a start. In NLP, you'll learn about values elicitation. You will learn very little about values transformation, but you can do values transformation. The other thing that does help vision, which is something that you mentioned there, is contrast. Contrast is a great thing. you can, once you've got a contrast in place, you can go, oh, look, I can see how that's different from that. If I'd only ever eaten oranges, I couldn't appreciate oranges as deeply as if somebody gave me an apple to eat. Then I could go, ah, right. And then I can start to see things about the orange that I could never eat when I was only ever eating just oranges. So this is why, for me, I mentioned that I do this thing, like where I model people, like Alberto, other people I've modeled. My friend John Patrick Morgan, extensively modeled John. William Whitecloud, to a certain degree. Mike Weeks. Steve Chandler. So I tend to, and there's other peripheral people as well, people who are good at really creating stuff, I model them. Or anyone who has an interesting way of being in the world, I'll model them. And one of the things I do is what I call speculative semantic modeling, which is a fancy name for a kind of simple process. If somebody's doing something very differently for me, I ask, how is it they must be seeing things in order for that behavior to make sense? And I also ask myself, what must they value? And one of the interesting things, this is speculative semantic modeling, because it is purely speculative. How the hell can I know? I can't mind read them. So it's based on guesswork, speculative, semantic, because I'm interested in the semantic material, the belief systems, the values, the meanings that they bring to bear. And I'll pull those structures out and I guess them, basically. And then I compare them to my own. And one of the biggest learnings I often get is that things that other people value, this got me to a place of, people talk about values, but they don't talk about anti-values a lot. So anti-values are anything that you might move away from. So stability might be a value for you, or it might actually be that instability is an anti-value. Many years ago, when I was first learning NLP, I was out with a friend of mine, and we were at a music venue in Bedford, in Bedfordshire. And he was kind of recently single, and he was lamenting the fact that he didn't have the guts to go up to a group of ladies who were out and introduce himself. And I thought, aha. I said, so, I can't remember, I asked a question. I said, so what is it that's stopping you? I think I'd asked him. And he said, well, I don't want to get knocked back. And I had learned that it was good to put things in terms of positives. So I thought, well, it's not that he doesn't want to fail, he wants to succeed. I said, so you want to succeed in going up and making a connection? And he paused and thought and said, no, I just don't want to get knocked back. And it was at that point I realized that you get these anti-values as well. Things that, well, a value is something that somebody's drawn towards. An anti-value is something that people will avoid like crazy. So some people's values, one person's values can turn out to be somebody else's anti-values. So, I recognized when I was doing a lot of modeling years ago that a vast number of the people I really admired were highly motivated by challenge. Challenge was a major value for them. For me, it was an anti-value. I didn't want challenge. Challenge seemed like discomfort and hard work and So if I wanted to start creating, like say somebody I've modeled who had challenge as a driver value, I had to connect into making challenge a driver value. So I had to start doing inner work, like magical work, to create challenge as a value. If I wanted to start operating in ways similar to these people I've been modeling. So this is another area where contrasting can start to help you see better and start to help you know yourself better. Like the apple and orange thing. If I don't sample someone else's reality, it's very hard. It makes it harder for me to see my own. But as soon as I sample somebody else's, I can see my own. You know, so contrasting my own reality to Alberto's reality, contrasting my own reality to my friend John's reality. It's not because I want to become those people, but it helps me in my own development doing that.
So to map my own values, do I need to do a self-facilitation of this eliciting values from NLP?
I've never done it.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean it's not a good thing to do. So here's the thing. Let me pull the magician out here. If the magician hasn't vanished himself, here's the magician. So again, and we'll go into some of the features on the magician card. One of the interesting things about the magician here is all the stuff on his table or her table. Here's all her table. Right now, and also some could say that this little bag here is the is the stereotypical magician's bag with infinite stuff that can get pulled out. Now, all of this stuff on the table can be picked up, manipulated, used, deployed. An NLP values elicitation might be on the table there somewhere. And a magician could pick up an NLP values elicitation and use it and may get a good effect from it, because that's why these things are on the table, to take and manipulate and use and make differences with. So that's why they're on the table. So an NLP's values elicitation might be, I've never done one. I'm aware of the concept of values. I get curious about values as and when they come up, but I've never done a sort of like, right, I'm going to do a comprehensive mapping of my values or anything like that. I know some of my values, freedom is a value, and it's worth seeing the role that plays in my life, where it actually can be limiting sometimes in a lot of places, because it can make me choose freedom now rather than creating other things that I want. Or it can have me turn around and say to somebody, screw you, and I'm going to do what you tell me, even if what they're telling me is a useful thing for me to hear, because I love freedom so much that I don't want to kowtow to somebody else's structure, even though I could learn a great deal from it. So, often our greatest strengths are our greatest weaknesses. So it is useful to come to know yourself, know what your tendencies are, know what's already in place. But I wouldn't say that there's any one method or project for going, right, here's a one-hit deal for me mapping out the entirety of who I am, my values, all of that kind of thing. So, you can be curious about it. Do you know the NLP values elicitation process?
No, I was just going to Google it and do it.
Yeah, Google it up. I'd be a lousy person to teach you. I haven't thought about it for years.
Yeah.
But I'm aware of the concept of value.
Is this where you use felt sense in contrasting yourself to others and to people that might have the values or be getting the results that you're wanting to get? Or...
Yeah, all my processing includes felt sense. So I always want to know what is this creating for me in my body right now as I think about it this way, or what am I experiencing in my body? What are the subtle bits and pieces? So that is always in the mix. We're going to come on to doing more on felt sense in a few weeks' time, for those who are wondering. There's a lot of pieces we want to put together here, and there's no good order to put them together in. That's why I'm picking the arbitrary order designated by the Tarot de Marseille. But yeah, I do want to feel into things a lot. So, the magician. There's some things I want to share about the magician, because we are going to build our magician selves And this is a place to stand within our being. It's a consciousness structure that we want to create, where we can look at other consciousness structures, other trances, other things that come up. The first thing about the magician is abracadabra. I create as I speak. I create as I speak. Now, really, there's a deeper layer to this, which is I create as I think. This is the deeper layer. Speech is an expression of thought. So before speech, there is thought, some of which is linguistically structured, some of which has other forms. So really, this is I create as I think. Now, the hidden level of this is the I that creates. I create as I think. So the main thing here is about intentionality. So the magician creates outcomes. The magician manipulates these things, these tools, these devices to get stuff happening. This is the basic essence of the magician, creation. I create as I think, and creation through dexterous manipulation. Now that could be dexterous manipulation with the hands in the literal interpretation, but it's dexterous manipulation with the mind that we're really looking at. So I create as I think. Now the other thing about magicians is magicians play with illusion a lot. But illusion isn't necessarily empty. So there's a lot of illusion in the I. I create as I think. Who is the I? Anyone who's got into non-dual and stuff like that knows that when you start to really look, that I gets nebulous and disappears and can take on many forms and guises. So even the magician who creates as he or she thinks is working with illusions, but illusion and reality are not so very different as people often think they are. So some of those illusions impact reality, and some of those illusions inform about reality. So there's a real kind of play, and this starts to get us into an area we're going to talk about more and more, which is the imaginal interface. How what we bring up in our experience, in our phenomenology, can tell us things about the world that we might not see in a regular sense, or be able to sense in a regular sense, and also enable us to bring ourselves to bear upon the world. But we'll come to that because our culture dismisses imaginary stuff as being juxtaposed with reality and contrasted with reality. But actually the imaginal interface is an interface with reality. Because the other thing about magician here is the magician is manipulating things to get an effect, to make things happen. So if it's not difference making stuff, that's not the work of the magician. The magician pulls the rabbit from the hat, but if no rabbit emerges from the hat, then it's a crappy piece of magic. So this is the first lesson of the magician: intentionality, making things happen, dexterous manipulation. I create as I speak, or I create as I think. I manipulate thoughts, I manipulate self. Manipulation, transformation, getting things happening. Now, the proto-magician here, the shadow side, and I call this the proto-magician because this magician hasn't evolved yet. This is the start point. There's not necessarily any wisdom here in these creations, in these manipulations. They can be kind of superficial in some senses to start with. So the proto-magician, the starting point, I distracted myself. I don't know what I was going to say about the proto-magician when I started talking about wisdom. So I'll come back to that in a moment. So yeah, it's very much about kind of manifestation, manipulation, transformation, dexterousness, these sorts of things. Oh yes, the shadow side, that's what I was going to say. The shadow side can be holding too tight, over controlling. So that's the kind of shadow side of the proto magician. It's like, I'm going to make this happen. I'm going to get this thing happening. Too much precision, too much holding on, too much control, too much micromanaging. But that's the shadow side. That doesn't mean it's bad. It means it's the shadow side. That micromanaging sometimes needs to be there to evolve into something more elegant later on. So I'm just pointing that out at this stage. Now, I would also say that the magician is our magician self is the trance master. And if you live your life through a series of trances, the you that can rise above those trances or step aside from those trances, this is reminding me of a conversation that I was having with Stephen, the you that can step back from those trances and look at them and start to see them more clearly and start to work with those trances in terms of transformation and maybe creation of new trances, that you is the magician you. That you, the you that can step back, be the trance master. And in a sense, by the way, the magician you, that is the main job of the magician you. So let's say I want to be a phenomenal public speaker. What I want to do is I want the magician me to create a trance me that does phenomenal public speaking. It's not necessarily the job of the magician me to do the phenomenal public speaking. Right? Now, this is an important thing because often when people do self-development work, they don't get this distinction and they can end up bummed out with themselves, which is unfortunate because that's not a very generative thing. So let's imagine that I see some new distinctions in the world and I'm feeling empowered by these new distinctions and I go, shit, how could I have never seen this before? This is awesome. This opens up so many new possibilities. And then we suddenly find ourselves in a situation where events unfold a certain way and we drop into a trance that excludes these new insights. What can happen is afterwards we can say, oh, I thought I'd really changed something there, but it turns out that it didn't really change anything. And that problem came up again. It's not so. It's not so. So as soon as you start creating a magician self, you can say, yes, my magician self knows this and sees this clearly, but this trance state doesn't yet. Or this consciousness structure doesn't yet.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, please do. Please, anyone ask any questions at any point.
Okay.
That's the rule.
I just didn't want to interrupt the flow there. So, and this goes to our conversation a little bit on this, and some work that I've been doing around that. So I'm finding a couple of things that I'm working with as I'm pulling back into this magician self. And one of those is that, and I think they're both related. So one of them is building a sense of trust, or let's say rebuilding a sense of trust in that magician self, because I find that that magician self has spent a lot of time justifying, let's say, situations very similar to what Matt is finding himself in over the years. So, you know, which again, I mean, I valued and I still in some ways value, and they served their time and time to pull back, but it's also something where I feel like, in a way, that magician self, in order to justify doing what I felt like I needed to do to get by, or to, you know, to do whatever I was doing, sort of in a way sold me a bill of goods, or let's say put a certain creative aspect of me in a cage. And then the other thing is that I'm finding a little bit, so it's kind of feeling my way into even recognizing that creative aspect, or trusting that there can be a creative aspect, because I've spent so much time sort of justifying the drudgery and the value of it in a way. So, you know, those are things that I'm working with, and I'm finding my way in and through that, and I'm trusting that that takes some time and space with that. But I kind of wanted to bring up those two things, because at least for me, it's a significant part of trying to find my way into this.
Right. So here's an interesting thing. Who is the I that is not trusting the magician self?
So this is where I was asking about that, because what I came upon when I sat with that question was that in a way, this magician self is kind of like, you know, a child that wasn't allowed to express that yet, and needs to sort of like need to develop. That I felt like there was a self kind of behind or above that yet, that sort of needed to create a safe space for that magician to kind of come out in.
So I think that magician self that you're wondering whether you can trust or not is not your true magician self. And I think, at least the way that I categorize and organize this, is let's say your magician self is your highest self. Let's use that metaphor.
Okay.
Use the metaphor of your highest self. Now, your highest self is the you that is able to is going to be the I that's doing the evaluation. So the I that says, I don't know whether I can trust the magician self, is the true magician self. Or I would advocate you making that I the basis for the true magician self. Now, there may be a playful self that's played with magical things that you're talking about here, and I don't know that you're thinking there's that self. But I would suggest that you want to make this magician self your highest self.
Okay.
Now, there's a lot of different ways of looking at this, and a lot of different wisdom traditions and therapeutic models and things like this.
Yeah.
That can offer some way in. I got an insight in this from secondhand via somebody else. I think originally it came from transactional analysis. But this idea in transactional analysis of parent, adult, child, right? 3 ego states, as they rather conveniently carve it up. Now, this idea of your adult self, there's a question that somebody invited me to ask myself. Is anytime I was in a situation like where I was like, oh, this thing happened, and I felt like to check in and say, is that my adult self? You know, how old did I feel when that happened? It's like, well, you know, actually I've kind of regressed. So if I've got the sense of regression, it's not my adult self. Now, this was a really liberating thing for me, because I was like, oh, right, yeah. I wasn't noticing when I was losing my adult self. And sometimes I might lose my adult self, not like the behavior, and then feel bad and think that that was me. But it wasn't my adult self. It wasn't my higher self. And then there's the judging part, which is like the critical parent self, which can sometimes think that it's the adult self, but it's not. The critical parent self isn't the adult self either. So the self that says, oh, what the hell's wrong with you? You know, that can People can think that that's their adult self. It's not. It's an internalized critical parent sort of voice. So the adult self, the true adult self, is the adult, is free from the critical parent. And is free to what I would call evaluate rather than judge. There's a big difference between evaluation and judgment, which a lot of people don't get. So like judgment says, you know, if you look at a court, what is a judge in a court there to do? Proclaim guilty or not guilty, right? It's very binary, judgment tends to be. Just putting things in categories. This pen is a crap pen. Oh, look, see, look at that. There we go.
Synchronicity.
Yeah. Or I judge this pen to be crap. I judge this pen to be good. I can judge this pen in a variety of different ways. If I judge the pen as crap, no big deal. If I judge myself as crap, ooh, ouch, not so comfortable. So if I evaluate the pen, that's a different thing. I say, well, it's a useful pen. It's a dry white pen. The tip's a little blunted. It's just not as sharp as it was. When I write on the board with it, I wipe it off. It leaves a little bit of residue, so it doesn't wipe off as cleanly as I would like it to. These are statements of evaluation. It's very, very different from judgment. So, and again, this is a key aspect of what we want when we cultivate our higher self, our magician self, whatever, our higher self, our adult self, our whatever. Our higher self does not judge. Our higher self evaluates. Our higher self can take perspectives. It's a good perspective taker. So if there's a you that's evaluating, Stephen, going, well, I don't know if, I don't know whether I can trust that or not. I would suggest that is a stronger basis for a higher self and for a magician self than whatever it is you're wondering whether you can trust or not.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
What are your thoughts on
that? Well, the first thing that came to me was, we'll see, is some sort of austere Germanic heritage of this creative self is younger. The adult is, like adult is not creative, right? And that's where I'm. So, I guess in a way, that's where I was feeling into this thing of, trusting that creative spark.
Right. So this higher self that can evaluate. As I put it kind of here in my notes, I said, and this, none of these metaphors are perfect. The higher self, the magician self, is the trance master. So that means the higher self, in doing its magic, can draw through from the creative self. So this higher self can draw a lot of stuff through and play with and influence a lot that's in the mix.
Yeah,
without necessarily being that. So that younger creative energy, that is powerful stuff. And you might want to be able to channel it through your wand, so to speak, to use that metaphor. But that doesn't mean you necessarily become it fully and completely. Or you might for a time while you're using it, while you're channeling it through.
Yeah, I can feel that. I'll play with that.
Yeah. So, and ultimately, like I'm sharing with you stuff about how I organize this stuff within myself so I can make use of different energies and these sorts of things within myself. You know, and there's the whole thing about when do we let ourselves get lost in that energy and when do we keep a line in so we can pull ourselves out. And these are subtle elements of the craft, and there's no straight black and white answer. Just the same as well, you know, how low should I drop my elbow during a forehand smash? There's no real answer. It's going to depend on your forehand smash in tennis. I didn't need to add that in tennis, but I'm sure everyone got that. So, and by the way, just to borrow my friend Melissa Tia's phrase, this shit is all made up. You know, I said about the magician being an illusionist. So this stuff is kind of made up, but it's real as well. It's the imaginal. It has it's like, what does this create when we make it up this way? So I have a lot of stuff. All my stuff is made up. What I'm trying to do here, or what I do here, is I bring consciousness to the further making up of myself and my world. Because everybody's stuff's made up. It's just that most of us kind of made it up pretty unconsciously with a lot of external influences as we were growing up. So I want to bring consciousness to making up myself and my world. In order to do that, like some of the most powerful attributes are the attribute of being able to evaluate, not judge, evaluate with equanimity. That's without judgment. This is an important aspect. So this is a layer to the higher self, the magician self. A couple of other layers, a couple of other features that I would recommend as you create your highest self, things that you might want to bring into your highest self. The first of these is the concept of the I that chooses. The I that chooses. Now, my old mentor, Steve Chandler, unlocked my life in so many ways with so many things. But particularly, this was a mind-blowing thing for me because when I hired Steve as my coach, my background in self-development stuff was hugely dominated by NLP and hypnosis and Ericksonian hypnosis. And I'd been teaching for years about, you know, people are patterned and it's all about our unconscious patterns and the dominance of the unconscious and patterns and the power of the unconscious. And, you know, consciousness and choice are not big buzzwords in the world of NLP. Maybe John Grinder. John Grinder, I once noted him saying when he was in flow, he said, control is an illusion. Choice is the point. So John Grinder's got something on choice. Well, there was a thing that Steve Chandler said, or at least this is how I remember it, and I probably morphed it in my mind. He said, stop identifying with your personality. Stop identifying with your past. Stop identifying with your history. Stop identifying with who you think you are and who you fear you are. And start identifying with the I that chooses. This blew my mind. It's like, the I that chooses? What? The I that chooses. You know, I'd had a dim view of choice. I associated it with willpower and struggling against the might of the unconscious. So how did the I that chooses fit with this? Now, going back to that John Grinder point, the I that chooses is not the I that controls. Choice and control are very, very different things. Control is an illusion. Choice is available to us in every moment. Most of the time we don't know it because we're not aware, we don't see clearly enough in the moment to make choices. So the I that chooses, once you start identifying with the I that chooses and valuing the power of the I that chooses, you need to be able to see to choose. You need to be able to see a distinction to make a choice. If I have one category called fruit, then there's no choice between an apple and an orange. If somebody says to me, James, would you like fruit or fruit? But if someone says, would you like an apple or an orange? And I have a choice, but it's only through seeing, it's only through having categories of distinction. So the I that chooses, this is a start point of developing power within your higher self, or power within yourself as a magician, is to identify with the I that chooses and start to seek where you have choice. Seeking where you have choice does not mean struggling against things you cannot control. Doesn't mean that. Very, very different thing. So start identifying with the I that chooses and start finding choice, more choice, more choice. Find choice everywhere. This is an ongoing process. I have a very simple little piece of personal magical technology. As far as I'm concerned, anything I can do up here, I create as I think. Any mind maneuver I can do that creates difference in myself and in the world is a piece of magical technology. So this is a piece of magical technology that I have for myself, that I developed for myself and I use. And it's the circumstances choice maneuver. I've shared this with some people before. I think I may have seen Claire nodding, so I may have shared this with Claire before. But I shall share it with those who I haven't shared it with before. I have a simple made up distinction, which is anything that I cannot change right now, in this moment, is circumstances. So the fact that I'm in a blue chair, the fact that it's blue is part of the circumstances I'm in right now, because I cannot immediately change this. I can set events in motion that might lead to the chair being recovered with different material or me buying a different chair, but I cannot change the chair. So the chair is circumstances. Let's imagine I'm headed somewhere and I'm going for an appointment, like I was the other week. I was going to the osteopath. I go down to the tram stop and I find, oh yeah, because of COVID, trams are running less frequently. So there's a good chance I'm now going to be late for the appointment. I don't like being late, but I'm going to be. So if I can't make the tram appear immediately, that's circumstances. Can't change that. If, now, so the old, what's it called? Serenity prayer. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Anything you cannot change is circumstances. But here's where this sort of like really helps me out. So what's circumstances and what's choice isn't necessarily fixed. So a lot of people in the world of self-development will tell you, they will talk in the world of NLP especially, or anyone who's been in the Tony Robbins seminar, will talk about state control. So who's heard people talk about state control? Okay, who here has mastered state control? Just curious, because like I was going to come and learn from you if you had, because I haven't mastered state control, right? I can influence my state, and I've got quite a lot of choice in how I influence my state, but I can't control it. So if I get feelings come up in my body, let's imagine I'm going somewhere and I have a feeling of trepidation. If I cannot magic that away, that becomes circumstances, even the feeling. So I treat it as such. Now, so the maneuver I use in my mind is I say, if this is circumstances, if I find myself struggling against something or trying to shift it or try and change it, and it's not shifting and changing, I accept it as circumstances and I ask myself, if this is circumstances, whereabouts is choice? Now, the key here is to stay with the intention of seeking choice, not necessarily to come up with an answer. Oh yeah, of course, here and here is choice. Because what you don't want to do is go, if this is circumstances, whereabouts is choice? I don't know where choice is. Ah! And then you're back in the loop. So it's staying with the where is choice? Where is choice? Now, I happen to know already, so I've got a head start on this, that the place where I have the most choice is in how I move my mind in relation to my experience. As the Stoics say, there are only two things within your realm of power in life: your choices and your conceptions. And conceptions is how you're making things up, how you're thinking about things. And they see choices as actions. Those are the only two things that you really have true power with. Everything else is secondary influence. Direct power is with conceptions and choices. But we need to know that. We need to be able to have a place to stand, an eye that chooses to step back to, so that we do not get lost in a victim trance that cannot see no choice, that cannot see any choice, and is convinced that there is no choice, right? All the power is out there. There is nothing I can do. So that's the final point that I wanted to make about being a magician, or your magician self, or your higher self, is the idea of ownership. Ownership. So ownership is partly about taking choice, but partly it's about allowing yourself to have power and domain. Right? It's allowing yourself to have power and domain. And what I mean by that is, I cannot immediately change the cloth on the chair, but I do own the chair. It's my chair. It's my chair. So I can initiate things. I can choose to have the cloth changed on the chair. I can choose to arrange with a chair recoverer. It's my chair. So I know that by taking ownership, I have power. Now, here's another thing that I want to start to do as a magician, is start owning everything that's cool that I can own. So I never used to do this. I used to do what a lot of people do. Maybe this is an English thing. I don't know. Maybe you guys from other places have this going on too. Somebody might say, hey, James, I love the way you did X. And I'd go, oh, no, it's just, no, thank you, but it's just dismissing. Instead of going, yes, I'm going to own that mofo. I did that really, really well. Right? So there's all sorts of things you can own. You can own your choice. You can own your power, but you can own attributes. You can take ownership of instead of pushing away. Now, ultimately, our aim with this is to become inside-out creators. We want to have more power in the world. We want to have more power in our lives. If you do not value your attributes, your upside attributes, if you just take them for granted, you're disempowering them. Right? You want to blow more life into things, right? So let's say I'm a good learner, right? I'm a good learner. I'm a good learner because I think deeply. I'm not the fastest learner, but I'm a rich learner, right? I own that. I make that a part of who I am. I make that a part of my power. And you know this thing, yeah, Elad.
What about, let's say, the patterns, or a pattern that I don't like, something that triggers me, and then a pattern emerges.
Yeah.
I can own this pattern, yeah.
Yeah.
But whereabouts is choice? In my the example I have in mind, maybe because it's late at night here and I'm hungry and I think I want to eat something.
Yeah.
And then you say, okay, it's a pattern thing and it's a desire or something. And
Yeah.
whereabouts is the choice? Usually it seems like I succumb to it and I say it's either I fight it or I don't know, I just go with the flow and feel like shit. And then I ask, okay, so what would you do? Or in this particular example, whereabouts is choice, or what do you do?
So I'll give you a handful of choices right now, but actually the truth is you have infinite choices. So the first choice that you have is to observe the mofo. There's one choice. Second choice, here's one. It's another little piece of magical tech that I run on myself. And it's from parts work. I'll say, like, let's say I'm in that situation, I'll say, that's interesting. There's a part of me that wants to go and raid the fridge. And then I'll say, now, of course, there has to be another part that doesn't want to raid the fridge.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I just go raid the fridge and it would be no big deal. I just raid the fridge, I'd eat, go, tasty. And that would be it, right? So I go, there's a part of me that wants to raid the fridge and a part of me that wants something else. So what does that other part want? So what does the other part want that doesn't want to raid the fridge?
No, that's a really good question, because when you asked it, it's a part that wants to look good, to be seen as good. I want to raid the fridge. That's what I really want to do. But I'm afraid that if I will do it, people will see me in a bad light or something of a fear trance. Yeah.
So here's a couple of things. There's a part of me that wants to raid the fridge and a part of me that is afraid of what people will think if
the consequences.
The consequences. Okay. So which one of those do you want to look more deeply into?
I have an inclination to kind of observe them both, because I like the one that wants to raid the fridge, like Alberto, to be the boss. And I want to go into the fear and just get to know it a little bit better and see how the dynamics can work out between these two.
Right. So there is a choice. Right there. That's a powerful choice. It's a powerful magician choice, because the magician is the trance master. Not the trance master in the sense of, you trances do what I say, but in the sense of, let's have a look at this. So sometimes I'll do this thing. I'll say there's a part of me that wants X and a part of me that wants Y. And I acknowledge them. And instead of identifying or siding with one or the other, right, I take a third position and say, so when I know this, what do I choose right now? The I that chooses. Because let's say, here's raid the fridge. If I go and I disappear into raid the fridge, then it's not really me choosing to raid the fridge. It's raid the fridge. It's the raid the fridge trance is running the show, which is fine, you know. But I can stay out and think, okay, here's the part of me that wants to look good and the part of me that wants to raid the fridge. What does position 3 want? The more clearly you can see into both these parts and what they want and what they're structured from and what their values are and all of that, you can step back and you can ask yourself, and when I know this, what do I choose right now from my higher self? And you might choose to raid the fridge, and you might choose not to, but you will be choosing from a different place. Do you see what I mean? There's a very interesting exercise in exercising choice. I used to do this thing where I don't do this so much anymore, but I went through a phase of doing this a lot, where I would carve out time to do specific things, to spend with creating certain things. So I'd say spend 45 minutes creating X. And what I would do is at the end of 45 minutes, I would have a timer. And when it would go off, I would have one rule, which is I get to do anything I want after spending 45 minutes with X, providing I choose it with consciousness. And I did this as an exercise for a bit. Now, you can't choose in every moment of every day in consciousness because we're going to get lost in the trances we're in. But like the thing would go off, beep, 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 beep. And I go, okay, I can do anything now. What do I choose? So if I went, oh, beep, 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 oh, great, and picked up my phone, I'm like, oh, I'm on Facebook. Doesn't count. Didn't consciously choose it. So that was a really interesting exercise to do, not because I'm saying you should live that way, but it's an interesting exercise to do to start developing seeing and choice, because choice is about consciousness in a lot of ways. You know, if you haven't got the consciousness on it, you can't choose. So that point, choosing to stop and look is a choice. You know, and sometimes when we do things differently, I remember I was coaching somebody for fat loss, and they went off and they did binge eating all the time. And then after they did binge eating when they felt like crap, when they're feeling bummed out, they go and eat tons to feel better. That was their strategy for feeling better. Except it was flawed, because as soon as they finished binge eating, another part of them would jump in and say, what the hell's wrong with you, you fat slob? So I pointed out to this person, I said, look, you're doing this eating thing as a sort of way of self-medicating to feel better. And they're like, yeah. I said, but then you're not letting yourself feel better afterwards. I said, so I'm going to give you one piece of advice. If you're going to self-medicate, at least take the medicine. At the very least, accept the therapeutic effect and enjoy it fully. Choose to self-medicate and choose to enjoy the medicine. So she did this and therefore stopped beating herself up. And across time, started to drop weight, drop fat. Now, I'm not saying that's always the path, but the pattern that was perpetuating had a bind inside of it, had a constant back forth struggle inside of it. So by this is the Stoic point again. The place where we have power is with our conceptions and our choices. All I did with her is got her to change her conception and make a different deal with herself, which is if she chose that, she would choose it and take it. Let herself receive the gift she was trying to give herself, instead of giving herself the gift and go, no, what's wrong with me that I'm taking this gift? So, often just going in and finding a different way of relating to things. So this is the thing about self-creation work. Some of my self-creation work is simple priming stuff. Some of it's owning attributes. Some of it's going, let's have a look at these trance structures. Let's see what's at play here. But if I'm going to do that, I have to do it from a place of evaluation and equanimity. I cannot do it from a place of judgment and self-criticism. Can't be done.
I must say that this, I won't call it exercise, just writing in the notebook every morning. I must say that for me, it was some kind of a leap, because maybe, as you said, suddenly you kind of you write something down and then it becomes more real. Because if I had it in my brain and I listened to smart people say things like what you just said, and thinking about it a little bit and feeling it, maybe trying it on for a little bit, but then writing it down every morning made it so much more powerful, because then I could do what you say, this moment of choice, because I was priming myself. Like doing it in the morning, half an hour, the work is done. And then whenever I had these things with food, in my case, then it kind of popped out some different quality of choice. And I'm just saying it as you asked in the beginning, like, how was the week writing down and priming down? For me, it was something very, very interesting. And it was a big change for me. And I listened to what you say for, I told you, like 10 years. I know the conceptualizations, I know how it evolved, but writing down was the bit that for me did a very big change this week anyway.
Right.
So
right.
Thanks for that.
Well, no, thank you, Elad, because that is the crux of this whole thing, is do and see what happens, right? Now, everything that we do, because there's 1,001 things you can do on paper and in your mind, and lots of inside out creation stuff. Some of it about creating new states of being. And I would particularly advocate that you build more and more attributes into your higher self or your resonant self or whatever. But the main thing is to do and evaluate. Now, when you evaluate, we're only doing the card after the Chariot, which is the end of our line, is, oh no, picked out the wrong card. Oh no, I didn't. Is justice here. If you look at justice, she's got these scales. Now, I like to think of these as scales of evaluation. Could be scales of judgment. But what you actually note about this on the old Tarot de Marseille, if I hold this right up, is what's she doing with her elbow? What's she doing with her knee? Those scales are not balanced. And if you look, there's an interpretation here that she's nudging the scales. Justice is cheating. Now, when we evaluate the work that we do, our aim is not to attempt to be objective. Justice cheats because justice has the wisdom to know that objectivity is a myth. It's impossible to be objective. So justice takes ownership of her bias. She doesn't want to be owned by her bias or had by her bias. She takes ownership of her bias and she uses it creatively and generatively. So, some people have a habit of doing this. What we want to do is when we are doing stuff, we want to bias ourselves to the upside of it. It's only a little tilt, only a little nudge to the upside, right? To sort of co-opt an idea from Nassim Nicholas Taleb, we want to expose ourselves to serendipity, then leverage the upside and mitigate the downside. Right? So we bias. This is part of magic. Magic isn't about objectively observing the world, it's about creating in the world. So when you do anything, be biased towards finding the upsides. anything, any act, any magical act, any mundane act, anything, be biased towards finding the upsides. Now, Elad's done these things and he's been looking for, what am I getting from this? That's a bias towards the upside. What am I getting from this? And that switches his filters on to go, I'm getting these things. And what difference does this make? And it feeds back into the system. And it starts to grow. This way it can be generative. Right? What we don't want to do is go, oh yeah, that's really made a difference to me. But that might have just been coincidence, so I need to do it. Right? That's flipping away. That's losing the magical bias. So yeah, we want to be able to evaluate what we're doing, but we create with the feedback rather than merely taking the feedback as evidence for something. It's going to feed back into ourselves. But what I really like there about what Elad said is that he's done this and he's starting to notice. Noticing is the single most important thing. Noticing, generative noticing. So there's some things about the magician. I'm building a magician's self. I'm starting to create a self that can step back from our trances and to start to look and take an overview of our life. And this self, this magician self, is something that will evolve. I mean, like if I have a magician self, which I've not usually thought in these terms until recently, I've always used the term my transcendent self. This self is the I that chooses. This is the self that any personal development stuff, this is the self I'm doing it on first. And then that self might get to coach some of my trance states. But that's the, this kind of higher self is what's doing the development first. So count your victories and do not ever, this is part of the generative bias, if you connect with a way of seeing the world that empowers you and then you go into a trance and lose it in a particular context, irrelevant. It's just information. It doesn't mean that you didn't build that into your being. It just means you flipped into a trance for a bit and kept it out. So don't take it too seriously. Still own your victory of the new seeing and the new being. That's a really strong recommendation.
I heard someone use the term with that so this is how an apprentice magician learns this. When they step, off for a second.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we're all apprentices. We're all learning. And, old ways of being, we still have a trance repertoire. We're just learning to become the masters of that so we can start working with it and transforming it. And we'll get more and more into that. Anyways, that's enough for today. Liz has got a question.
Yeah, this is a ridiculous question, but something fell out of my brain, and I just need a reminder on the priming and on the 30 minutes, because I got so caught up in some other stuff that I feel like I've lost what it is that I'm supposed. I hate to use the word supposed to be, but.
So initially, there's 1,001 things you can do with this half an hour. So what my suggestion was last week was to just begin to consider what you would like to bring into the day in terms of your beingness.
Oh yeah, I remember now.
So, I'm going to borrow my wife to give an example here. She has written up on the whiteboard in the kitchen, she has calm and even-tempered written up on the whiteboard. Because she is choosing at the moment to bring more calmness and even temper into her life. And she's done a smart thing. Instead of just saying, oh, you should be more like this, she's just calm and even tempered.
Right.
It's a simple thing like that. If she spent a few minutes a day at the beginning of the day really connecting in to what that means to her and how it is to be calm and even tempered, and all of these things, really get it resonating in every fiber of the being, that's going to massively increase the amount of calm and even temperedness that permeates her day.
Yeah.
Now, it doesn't guarantee that she might not end up in a stressed situation, but it massively increases the chance.
And do I remember that you, I mean, I know it doesn't matter what we do because we can do whatever we want, but do I remember that you want us to play with something different every day, or?
You can, I tend to
remember.
change stuff up daily.
Oh, okay.
Sometimes I go back over things, depends. I just do whatever. I mean, that's probably not necessarily helpful to say that. I always have a developmental edge. At any given time, I always have a developmental edge. And some developmental edges I will lean into for a couple of days, some a couple of weeks, some I'll lean into for a bit, then I'll lean out of, and then I'll lean back into them a bit later on. So I've always got a developmental edge in whatever I'm kind of doing. So at the moment, my developmental edge is actually staying in generative flow more often during client work. I've got that developmental edge. So I'm jigging a lot of stuff around that. And part of it's getting into what the creative, generative flow is like. And then part of it's also noting the times when I'm not in that flow. And what is it that I'm doing to keep myself out?
Right.
Right. And this is something I did want to talk about today, which is what I call the radical creation game. How am I creating that which is keeping flow out when I do it? Because sometimes that happens. And I've just kind of figured some stuff out just recently because this is my developmental edge at the moment. So I'm picking that one. So generally, basic priming is the sort of simplest thing you can do with your day. Another thing you can do is a gratitude practice, which is a classic thing that everybody knows. Now, there's some nuances around this. I never do a gratitude practice as in I am grateful for, because there's something in the energy of that for me, which is like, I'm so small and weak, so I'm grateful for everything nice that happens to me. It's kind of got that energy for me. It doesn't mean it does for other people. So what I do instead is I say, I gratefully acknowledge instead of I am grateful. Now, if you say, I gratefully acknowledge, I gratefully acknowledge the relationships in my life. I gratefully acknowledge the contribution of my family to our well-being. That has a very different energy for me from I'm grateful for.
Mm-hmm.
But it's only by checking in. Which one do I feel more? There's a simple check-in with your feelings, with any languaging of anything. Better or worse? Right? More empowered, less empowered. Higher vibration, lower vibration. Right? You want to be constantly moving yourself towards, yeah.
Yeah.
So, you could include like a daily gratitude practice. Another way of using gratitude to receive things is like, if you want to increase your income, you could be, I gratefully receive all the good things in my life, including an increasing income. So you can start to do like gratitude statements around that. So that's one mechanism. It's a classic attitude of gratitude. People don't really necessarily play with it and they don't feel into the difference it's making. But that's another option that you could do that you may already have heard of, because there's a lot of tools that I could give you for your table, but I don't have them organized because I'm not a trainer of tools for the table. I'm a guy that's ad hoc, developed a lot, explored with a lot. The easiest thing is me pull out my book and go, here's some ones I've done.
No, I get it. There was part of it had just gone off my radar.
Yeah,
it's back now.
That's fine. There's some stuff that I did want to do today, which I think I'll do in a separate video. So please remind me. And it was about Angela's point about what is it when, what do you do when you're creating something and you have a little voice which says, yeah, but, or some part that says, yeah, but that's not really what I am. I'm not really like that. These are, I don't know who used this phrase, but I heard it from my friend John, blurts. You can get them, blurts, when you're creating a little blurt that says, oh yeah, but that's not really true. Yeah, but you're not really like that. So there are mechanisms around that. Across time, you need less and less of the hack mechanisms. So the basic method I use is bridging. So if I wanted to say, I am a powerful and influential person, and a little blurt went, no, you're not. Or it's like, or a feeling said, yeah, that just doesn't quite feel true. I feel like I'm trying to con myself. I would then shift to a bridging statement. I would ask myself the question, am I willing to connect with my capacities to influence? Like if I wanted to bring influentiality in, I've used this as a teaching example before. I'd ask myself that question first. Am I willing to connect with my capacities to influence? And I would check in. I want to get a true yes. I want to get a clear and congruent yes from myself. Yes, I am. Now, what you do here is you sort of downgrade. So who here feels like they're a highly influential person? Put your hand up if you already feel like you are. Okay, so some do. So who didn't put their hand up? Right. So Liz, I'll pick you. You don't feel like you're a highly influential person, but do you feel like you have some capacities to influence?
Yeah.
Right. So that's an example of bridging.
Bridge, right.
You sort of take down, you'd ratchet it down. Instead of I am influential, which is a very strong I am statement, and it's a great thing to resonate with if you can resonate with it. But if you can't, you step back. And instead of it being about identity, I am influential, it becomes about capacities, plural, to influence. And am I willing to connect with those capacities to influence? Yes. And then you can create a statement that says, I am connecting with my capacities to influence, which is slightly stronger than am I willing to connect with. And if you can resonate with the truth of that, enjoy resonating with the truth of that for a bit. And then maybe like at some point you do a further upgrade. And in the end, you get to the, yeah, I'm an influential person. So you ratchet up slowly. Yeah, Elad.
Right. I like that.
I think I learned it from you. You said something like, I am becoming an influential person. That's one thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm learning to become, or I'm learning to be an influential person, like another bridging kind of technique.
Yeah. So these are all examples of other mechanisms for bridging. So whatever quality it might be, if I'm trying to think of another quality, but my brain, someone chuck a quality my way that you would love to be.
Flexible.
Flexible. Okay, so if you started off with, I am profoundly flexible or something, and it's like, yeah, but I'm not. You might go to, I would go to the question first, but am I willing to develop my flexibility? Yes. Okay. Am I open right now to committing to developing my flexibility? Yes. So then you might start to get a generative statement of, I am choosing commitment to developing my flexibility. So something like this. Now, every single declaration, you want to make sure there is no resistance to it. If there's resistance to it, you're going to be in struggle with self. You're going to be in the game of arguing about what is or isn't so with yourself. So if you sense a resistance to it in your felt sense, which we're going to come to in a week or so's time, you want to back off and find a way in that there's no resistance to, and you can start to resonate with. And it might be, I'm making a commitment to developing my flexibility. It could even be, I'm open to developing my flexibility. I see the value in developing my flexibility. That could be a resonant statement. Just, I see the value in developing my flexibility. I'm choosing to connect more with developing my flexibility. So notice that one, I'm choosing to connect more. This resonates with the I that chooses. And to connect with, like it's still here, but I'm connecting with it. It's not like I haven't made it fully me yet. So there's lots of ways. At some point, like I think to myself, I'll go through my magic book and I'll model out all the patterns that I use and put together some sort of system of doing it. I just haven't done that formally yet, because I do it by feeling. Do I need to ratchet back, or can I lean in more and amp it up? And sometimes it's you've got to step away before you can step in a little bit. A mistake that a lot of people make with affirmations is they're just trying to lean into stuff that doesn't seem true, and so they end up arguing about what is or isn't so, and that creates more of a destructive energy than a generative energy. So I might come back to that again, more formally. This recording, I did record the last week's one, but I didn't put it up because it was largely just kind of intros and there wasn't really a lot by way of principles in it or anything like that. But I'm going to put the playback of this up in the Facebook group as a private link on YouTube. So even though it'll be hosted on YouTube, if people don't have the link, they won't be able to find it. So we'll just keep the link within the group, and then people that want to check that can check that. All right, so Garrett's run because, like, you know, that thing I said about trying to keep to 2 hours, and that was my challenge and all of that. Well, there you go. It's week 2, and I've busted that one right out.
Brain can't take any more.
Yeah.
My brain can't.
Yeah. And by the way, don't think that your brain has to take all of this, because it doesn't. Okay, there's a recording there to watch back if you wish to choose. If you choose to do so, let your brain take the low-hanging fruit for you. We will be iterating.
My suspicion is these extra moments just gave Garrett lots of fuel to take into his gray zone.
Maybe so. Okay. So should we close here now for this week? If you do watch this back through and you come up with questions, please do ask them in the Facebook group. If you have any questions anyway, if you don't watch this back through, please do ask them in the Facebook group. Other than that, I look forward to interacting with you across the next week, and I look forward to seeing you all again next week.
Thank you, James. Have a good week, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.